Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2! It's a challenge, Kakarot!
The Instantaneous Transmission Counter. When considering Dragon Ball Z and the characters that dwell within, we cannot help but think of Goku and the abilities he exhibits. One of the abilities that makes Goku so unique is his Instantaneous Transmission. The Instantaneous Transmission can be performed by Goku and a few others in Tenkaichi 2, making them dangerous characters in the right hands. However, as Tenkaichi 2's mechanical understanding has advanced in relation to the understanding of focal adherence and movement exploitation, we have come to realize that the nature of the Instantaneous Transmission betrays itself. When performing an Instantaneous Transmission, the player's character, Goku, will pause, stand up straight, and disappear. In this instance, he will automatically reappear behind his opponent inside the step-in barrier. However, though he is inside the step-in barrier, his opponent de-locks from him and must lock back on. Again, however, as Goku is immediately placed within the step-in barrier, the lock-on is immediately reactivated. The issue here is that Goku's recovery from the Instantaneous Transmission allows him to begin attacking again before the would-be victim's lock-on is achieved, never mind the re-establishment of orientation. So, how does a player deal with the Instantaneous Transmission? Let us first look at the facts. When the opponent performs the Instantaneous Transmission, the character gives a tell right before the technique is used. Not only this, but due to the opponent's choice in character in any given battle circumstance, the player's ability of foresight, or Yomi, may help the player know when an Instantaneous Transmission is going to happen. When the Instantaneous Transmission takes place, the player's character will de-lock from the opponent. When the opponent reappears behind the player, it will take a second before he can lock back on, even if automatically. Therefore, even though the Instantaneous Transmission causes the player to de-lock, this puts him in a temporary state beyond the reach of focal adherence. During this brief instant, the player's character is free. Now, consider what we have learned in relation to close proximity movement when being freed, even if temporarily, from focal adherence. While the opponent must recover from the Instantaneous Transmission movement, there is nothing that the player's character must recover from except regaining focal adherence, which will happen naturally as long as he is in close proximity with the opponent. If this is the case, then even if the opponent reappears inside the step-in barrier of the player is still granted dash ability within the barrier. Knowing this, if the player were to immediately dash to the side as soon as the opponent appears, the dash will not leave the step-in barrier in time to prevent the re-establishment of lock-on. Therefore, orientation takes hold during the sided dash. As soon as the player's character is working within the laws of focal adherence again, he can then transition the dash into shift execution via R2 cancellation. Using what we know of the shift, we can use this to immediately move into rear positioning as the opponent recovers from his own Instantaneous Transmission, or even shift out of the step-in barrier for Super Blast transitioning. Now, before I end this episode, I would like to mention environmental effects. As any Tenkaichi player can attest, the stages of the game may or may not include aspects not found in the traditional fighter, such as buildings, trees, and lakes. While the traditional fighter may not consider stage factors to play a part in combat depth, they do provide a new view on strategic advances and overall metagame enhancement. For example, a player may recognize that his opponent works well at high speeds. Knocking him into the water changes the game completely. Movement is not performed the same way on water as it is on land. In fact, it is much slower, and dashes do not carry the player nearly as far. When a building is destroyed, a cloud of dust is temporarily left in its fall, providing a temporary means of visual cover. Depending on the situation, this may provide new strategies on tactical approaches. Ultimately, it is important to understand your characters and make the adjustments. Work with your environment, or it will work against you. Now, I mentioned in the last episode that we are reaching the finish line. Though I would like to include a recap of everything discussed, this alone would require too much time for a YouTube video. Therefore, I find it necessary to point out the following topics previously discussed, for if you take anything away from this project, it should be the following. Tenkaichi, while not a traditional fighter, is still a fighting game. Some people choose to view the game as a Dragon Ball Z simulator, but such a claim only supports the poor argument that does not reflect the true nature and depth of the game. Many traditional concepts still apply, such as zoning, priority, etc., but as Tenkaichi represents an evolution of console fighting, new concepts are introduced. Therefore, if a traditional player wishes to evaluate the Tenkaichi system, it is vital that he expands beyond traditional understanding. Focal adherence represents the mechanical laws of battle that both combatants must adhere to in relation to their focal point, being the opponent. While the traditional construct is built upon a single, and at times max at 2 levels of focal adherence, such as traditional 2-dimensional orientation and strafe orientation, Tenkaichi reaches far beyond the traditional standard, presenting a world of depth not exhibited by traditional fighters. While traditional fighters tend to emphasize the value of offense in defining depth, Tenkaichi 2 includes a balanced value of offense and defense in defining depth. The skill requirement for proper defense in Tenkaichi 2 far exceeds that of the traditional fighter, displayed through timing extremes, depth perception-based spatial cognition, advanced mechanical knowledge, and mechanical exploitation. As traditional fighters tend to stray from defensive depth due to a lack of variety in viable defensive options, such proves true for traditional movement, for while such movement is justifiably limited by the 2-dimensional construct, it is still, in fact, severely limited, comparatively speaking to the evolved world of Tenkaichi gameplay. Looking at the big picture, Tenkaichi 2 is far more balanced and well suited to expand on the concept of fight game depth than nearly any traditional fighter. Understanding the definition of depth as the number of viable options available during the flow of combat, this series has shown that Tenkaichi outplays the traditional understanding of depth, as the number of viable options are not limited to offense, as we reference viable options pertaining to defense and movement as well. Depth is also defined as the quality that portrays a game as being easy to play, yet difficult to master. As most basic players reference such concepts as button masher, the Dragon Ball Z simulator, and clone roster, it is clear that there is a major difference between beginner level and the advanced understanding of Tenkaichi. Reflecting such a definition of depth, Tenkaichi 2 is very easy to pick up, but extremely difficult to master. Unlike many traditional fighters, combos are constructed upon sets, which can be linked together through a variety of methods. With the inclusion of varying combo elements, and in addition to the offensive teleportation system and the multi-level cancellation system, the potential of the combo system seems to rise without bounds. The key aspect of Tenkaichi games extends the depth of combat, reflecting what options are available relating to all aspects of battle, including movement, melee, defense, and projectile attacks. Like the melee system, Ki Blast Understanding holds its own system with a slightly similar construct. Such a construct requires its own defensive system based on spatial cognition. Relying on depth perception for defense is more difficult than 2-dimensional timing. Such movement and offensive cancellation can be used to create completely new maneuvers that may or may not keep within the initiating laws of focal adherence. In a sense, the cancellation system of Tenkaichi 2 not only presents all viable options, but it creates options that were not initially available at all. Not many games can actually create depth. While the overall basic combat construct holds a specific measure of synergy, mechanical exploitation enhances such synergy to ensuring nearly all techniques can be performed at any time, unchained by the laws of focal adherence. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you all have enjoyed these videos. As with all things, we are reaching a final stopping point. If I might quote the author Frank Herbert of the Dune novels, there is no real ending. It's just a place where you stop the story. So stay tuned as I attempt to sum up and conclude this project, as I attempt to stop the story. This is ZeroAnnihilated, and you are watching Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 Evolution.